Hello, my name is Michael Udebrook, and I would like to do a short presentation on death and dying. A couple of extracts from books, two books written by Billy Meier. The first book being The Way to Live, and the second book being Wiedergeburt, Leben, Sterben, Tod und Trauer. This book right here. I don't know if you can see it, but it isn't yet available in English, but it will be. Anyway, some interesting passages from both those books. So I hope you enjoy this. So in the book, The Way to Live, on page 294, one must always be clear that one can never escape death. Consequently, there is also no sense in fearing it. Prepare for it before it arrives. Carefully study death so that there is a certainty that no anxiety is required about it. In the cycle of becoming and passing of the material body, it certainly forms a conclusion. However, it does not represent an end, but rather a passage to a new life through a reincarnation of the spirit form. The ongoing evolution is guaranteed through the constantly repeating becoming and passing. Consider the thought that one day one will lose one close to them as death approaches. How at any moment one could be taken out of the life. One ought to let the one next to him, her, feel real and sincere love during the life, and not only when they are dead, lying stiff and cold in the grave. Materialism, the meaning of life, death, and life after death is not talked about, nor considered because it is not profitable, nor to one's advantage. Death is simply degraded as being the end to worldly existence. Seen from a materialistic point of view, it is the final end. The materialist considers himself, herself quite practical, so why would they not consider the meaning of life and death, where their future lies? Dying and death, which one cannot avoid, are indeed the mightiest and the most energy-laden moments in the life of the human being. So here is a short passage which I'm going to read from The Way to Live on page 336. And it is rather important if you haven't read the book. There are many nuggets of wisdom and absolutely inspiring information. And this one stood out. So let me just read, bear with the reading. In the moment of the dying, the state of the consciousness is extremely important because when the death occurs, the last thoughts, feelings, and fine spiritual perceptions are also registered in the storage banks. Consequently, these can be accessed again in the next life and are able to wield an influence, according to their kind, on the thoughts, feelings, fine spiritual perceptions, and emotions. Therefore, with one's dying, a healthy, positive attitude of the consciousness is of greatest importance, because it can be retrieved again from the storage banks with the next reincarnation and is able to decisively influence the thoughts, emotions, feelings, and fine spiritual perceptions. If at the time of dying and the death, these are harmonious and equalized, then in the next life they contribute to success and progress, while with anxiety and disharmony, and consequently with unequalizedness, they correspondingly produce negative effects if they are retrieved in the next rebirth. Therefore, if the human being dies in a deeply upset state and in despair, then this can have harmful effects in the next life, and indeed even when the previous life has been put to very good use. In every case, it is the state of the consciousness at the time of the dying and of the death which is the decisive factor. The last thoughts, feelings, and emotions have a tremendously determining and mightful influence on the very next physical future, which will be at the next reincarnation. Just as human beings are extremely often at the mercy of the compulsion to repeat in the material life, thus is also the consciousness block, which, along with the spirit, crosses over into a realm of the other world. The consciousness block is defenseless during the time of the death against all arising thoughts, feelings, emotions, and fine spiritual perceptions. The consciousness block, which crosses over into a realm of the other world and is dissolved and is again born back into a physical body as a newly created block in the next rebirth, together with the spirit form, takes the last thoughts, feelings, fine spiritual perceptions, and emotions along into the realm of the other world, to then also take these along into the new material body of a new personality with the next reincarnation. There's much more to it, but I just wanted to read that section. Certainly, I do recommend the book The Way to Live by Billy Edward Albert Meyer. And here are some excerpts from Rebirth, Living, Dying, Death, and Sorrow by Billy. We'll be covering several snippets: physical signs of entering the death throes, the pre-agony stage, light at the end of the tunnel, and clinical death. On page 160, 161, agony, or the death throes. Condition and a near-death experience. Agony is equal to death fight or confrontation. It is the time of the fading of life functions and finally the collapse of the integrated organ systems. There can never be a spontaneous recovery from the state of agony, but in rare cases, there can be a gradual return into existence and life. General signs of agony are acutely pale, cool nose, projecting jawline, cool ears, pale gray skin, possible cold sweat on the forehead, loss of consciousness, dwindling pulse, and possibly heavy snoring breathing. Final stage is the termination process of the life function, and at the end, the collapse of the integrated organ system. The pre-agony stage, the dying experience arises when one transitions into the pre-agony state. If there is a sudden accident or murder or suicide, then the pre-agony and agony experience cannot be experienced. There is a smooth transition from the pre-agony to the agony state. In the pre-agony experience, the consciousness floats between its existence and loss thereof. The twilight wake condition of the consciousness. Under the surface, feelings and thoughts can still be created, and indeed according to the attitude-based leading of the life. Visions, built on hopes and wishes, can be perceived and can be stored in the still functioning memory. the hopes and wishes that were fostered during the life. These visions are steered by the thoughts and feelings through the imagination. There is the state of absolute peace and inner freedom. However, visions of an unconscious form cannot be perceived if the consciousness is completely clear. As a rule, if one dies in one's sleep, then the near-death experience does not occur, with very few exceptions. Light at the end of the tunnel. Light at the end of the tunnel is nothing other than the creation of the brain due to the breathing reduction and the lack of oxygen supply. The nerve cells that are responsible for sight begin to react uncontrollably. The nerve cells are primarily arranged for the center of the human being's sight field, and less so for the peripheral, hence the light tunnel. In the spiritual teaching, it is referred to as the agony light or agony light tunnel. Then, according to the imagination and the state of the psyche, as well as the beliefs, thoughts, and feelings, visions arise of loved ones, angels, people they believe to meet on the other side. If by some miracle one comes back from the pre-agony experience, they mistakenly assume that they came back from death, which of course is not possible. Clinical death, a state by which the breathing, heart rate, and brain activity is reduced, whereby even the EEG has a straight line or null reading, signifying no brain activity. This is still not in the deepest state of agony, and a revival is possible normally up to 5 minutes with artificial breathing and heart massage, but in extreme cases, 20 or 30 minutes, or even in very rare cases, even longer. In a cold climate, artificially created cold, or cold evoked by water. This, however, can only happen if there's enough oxygen in the brain. Otherwise, an irreparable damage occurs to the brain. Death only occurs when there is a complete irreversible cessation of the functions of the brain, and the consciousness block and the creation energy part piece escape from the colliculus superior. If someone has a dying experience, they actually have not died, but is in a pre-agony state, which is not the same as the deepest agony in which the spirit form and the consciousness block release from the colliculus superior and disappear into their realm on the other side. In a state of clinical death, but not biological death, one stands near the threshold of death. This means that one can possibly be revived, but in this state, there is no way that one can perceive the beyond sphere of the creation energy part piece or of the overall consciousness block. Before the state of agony, one can still be full of fear and panic, and hence let out a loud scream or whimper, but in the deepest state of agony, there is peace and calm. And with that, I say thank you, and until the next presentation, Salome.